Welcome to Novel Ideas, where we chat with local authors. I'm Carolyn Luck, and I'm here with co-host Josh Brogadir.
Carol, great to be with you as always.
And introduce our special
Look
guest
who
this
is
evening.
here tonight. Josh Funk. Josh is a good name. Josh is a good name for an author. And I would have to describe you as one of the preeminent children's authors in New England. How do you like that title?
I think I've got a ways to go. We've got a lot of great authors in New England. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
We'll begin with flattery, and let's talk a little about who you are and how you got to be in this role.
So I write picture books, and I've been writing for about six and a half years. And I started really when my kids were 3 and 6 years old. I was spending a lot of time reading books to them. And as I did, I found some books that I really, really loved, and both for the writing and the artwork, and I said, I want to try this. And I did. And I wrote some really, really horrible picture book manuscripts. And I found the right people, found some organizations, and found some people to give me the right advice and the right feedback on my writing. And within a few years, I ended up selling my first book and landing an agent. And it's been, I've had 5 books come out since the fall of 2015.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But what's your day job? Tell us about this.
I'm a software engineer, and I'm still a software engineer. I'm not planning on quitting the day job anytime soon. I've been working in the software industry for between college and an industry over 20 years. So, yeah.
Wow.
And a lot of people who have day jobs like software engineer sometimes want to spread their wings a little bit in the world of art. Is that something that was important to you?
You know, I always played guitar. No, well, not always. In high school and college, I played guitar and I wrote songs. I was never much of a visual artist, but I did like to write poetry and write stories throughout my childhood. It's funny, I talked to students in schools a good amount, and I never really thought of myself as a writer. I was always more of a math and science person. I took the honors math classes, but I didn't ever take an honors English class. I had my fair share of Cliff's Notes and when I was in high school. But I did, as I started to have kids. Well, as I had a lot of reading. I did a lot of reading with my kids, and that's really when I thought maybe I would. You know, I'm never going to be a rock star, but maybe I can write some lyrical picture books. And so that's kind of where I tried. And I talk to kids about it a lot now, and I realize that, you know, you don't have to be just a math and science person or just a reading and writing person. You really can do all the different things, whatever you like, and you can do a bit of both. So,
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Why don't we start with your first book, Out Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast?
Yeah. So this book, I got the idea for this book from my kids. I've told this story so many times, I'm not even sure it's true, but I came down for breakfast one morning and I asked my kids, I said, what do you want for breakfast? And one of them said, I want pancakes. And one of them said, I want French toast. And I was like, guys, I am a terrible cook. One time I burned their peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But so I looked in the freezer and all we had were waffles. So while they're eating their burnt waffles, I thought, you know, that might make a fun story, pancakes and French toast arguing with each other. And I asked my kids, I said, what do you think a pancake and a French toast would argue about? And one of them said, syrup. And I thought, of course, syrup, that's brilliant. The only problem is I can't remember which one of them said it. So now they argue about who came up with the idea for syrup. It started with 2 kids arguing about breakfast, and now it continues today with them arguing about syrup. So the story is that Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast are racing for the last drop of syrup throughout the fridge, causing culinary chaos along the way. Yeah, that's my first book, and it seems to have connected with a lot of people, so it's pretty cool.
It sold very well, the eponymous lady, and there's a spin-off now, second
yes, one. The Case of the Stinky Stench is the newer of the two, and they have I asked, have you ever opened the refrigerator and smelled something kind of funny? Usually most people raise their hands.
Right.
So that's what's happening in the fridge here. And so, yeah, Inspector Croissant has to help them figure out what happened in the fridge. And yeah.
Very cool.
It's pretty neat. So that series there, but what kills me is that it's very different the way you write different series. Like Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast are very different books from your Dear Dragon story.
Yeah, so, yeah, you know, when you're writing picture books and you're starting out, you don't know what's going to connect with people. You don't know what's going to click. And at the time that I was writing Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast, I was trying to write as many different things as I could because I didn't know what was going to find a home at a publisher or what would make an agent interested in representing me. And so I had written probably 10, 20, 30 stories, and most of them are not very good. But a few of them did find their way to the right publishers. And Dear Dragon is about a boy and a dragon who are pen pals, and they are writing letters to each other somewhat reluctantly at first, but they don't realize they're writing to a different species. So they eventually become, and it's illustrated incredibly well by Rodolfo Montalvo. So they have, for example, on the first page, or actually this is the second letter, Blaze is receiving a letter from George saying, "Hey, I was a knight for Halloween." And Blaze imagines a knight, a scary knight, because dragons are afraid of knights. But this is really on this side what George really did. And then similarly on the other side, George receives a letter from Blaze saying, tonight I gave my pet Bengal kitten a bath, and he's thinking like, oh, a tiny little kitty, but he really has a Bengal kitten for and so they meet at the end of the year, and it's cool because spoiler alert, they do become friends despite the fact that they have completely different backgrounds and they are different species, if you can call a dragon a species.
Yeah, fair enough.
Sure.
So, yeah.
If the dragon ate the boy, it probably wouldn't be a children's book. Let's be fair.
Well,
Spoiler alert notwithstanding.
Yeah, there are some good books where the main characters get eaten at the end. But
Oh, fair enough. So you just mentioned, or Carol mentioned, that your books are very different, at least the content of them. Is there anything in common with any of the... Someone picks up a Josh Funk book and the jacket was off, and they started leafing through it. How would they know it was yours?
Well, I write in rhyme a lot, not always. But I write in rhyme a lot, and it took a really long time to figure out how to write rhyme well. I'm still learning a lot, so I probably have room to improve. But so rhyme is something that I like, but a lot of people write in rhyme, and a lot of people write great rhyme. And another thing I try to do is I try to have fun and add humor. One of the most important things is I try to think about what I want to see illustrated. I am not a visual artist. I tell kids, in kindergarten, first grade, raise your hands if you like art. And, all of them raise their hands. By fifth grade, maybe half of them raise their hands. And I always tell them, keep working on your art because, I wish I could draw. Illustrator Brendan Kearney, he told me that he spent, there's a page in this book with a bean avalanche.
Yep,
and he told me he spent an entire week coloring in beans. A whole week. So if you work hard, someday it could be your job to color in beans because that is a real job. But yeah, so I think about things I want to see illustrated. I am not a visual artist, so I think I want to see what a pirate dinosaur looks like. I want to see pancakes and French toast running through the fridge. I want to see a boy and a dragon who are pen pals. And I try to make sure that whatever I'm drawing is something that I haven't seen before. I want it to be something that would entertain me. I know these are children's books. And most of the publishers, when you go and you look on the back, it'll say somewhere in the range of 3 to 6 or 5 to 8. But I always have in my head, I'm not a teacher, but I am a parent. And I read a lot of great books, and I read some that were just okay. And I want to make sure that the parents are entertained as well, like a Pixar movie. People love Pixar movies because they work on multiple levels. They're great for kids, and there's nothing offensive about them, and they're excellent storytellers, and they have humor that goes above the kid's head, but that's okay. And it makes it entertaining for the adult. So hopefully I use big words, I have jokes that will be more for the parents in some cases than for the kids, but I want to make sure that the adults are entertained.
Speaking of being entertained, I just read this book. It's not Jack and the Beanstalk. And I have never laughed so hard reading a children's book.
Nice.
That it just absolutely cracked me up. And I'm sitting in the living room reading this book, and my husband turns around, looks at me and says, "What is so funny?" And I said, wait, you gotta hear this. And I read him the whole book, and he was laughing just as much, and he said, boy, and I thought I used to tell the kids fractured fairy tales for bedtime stories when I was tired.
And that's a great
Tell us a
thing
little
too.
more about this.
Anybody can write fractured fairy tales. You know, we've all heard the stories of fairy tales. This book is called "It's Not Jack and the Beanstalk," and it's my first book that's not in rhyme. And it's I always thought that fairy tales had characters that do kind of dumb things. Jack trades his beans for, his cow for 5 beans. And you know, Little Red Riding Hood, did you really not recognize that it was a wolf?
Yeah, right.
I mean, you already pointed out the ears and the teeth and the nose, but you didn't. I mean, Hansel and Gretel, did you really not think that birds were going to eat the breadcrumbs on your way into the wood? I mean, there's some pretty dumb things. If a giant beanstalk grew in your backyard overnight, is the first thing you would do climb it? Probably not. So in this book, I have Jack is actually smart, and he says, "I'm not climbing that beanstalk. I don't want to climb the beanstalk." And he argues back and forth with the narrator. So, no, Jack, you have to climb the beanstalk. Yikes! Can I at least grab my climbing gear? No, I said you had no possessions earlier. I said you had no possessions. And, we at least make it shorter then. I'm not climbing unless you change the size. So I mean, basically they argue back and forth, and then 2/3 of the way through the book, you meet the giant, and everything just goes off the rails. Yeah, so I always thought it would be fun, and I actually wrote this one in conjunction a lot with my kids. It's great to read as maybe a reader's theater because it has multiple voices. So I would play the part of the narrator, and my daughter would be Jack. My son would be the giant, and there's Cinderella's in there for a second. My wife would be Cinderella because she only wanted to have one line. But yeah, so and it's a lot of fun, and it's kind of written in a little bit of a graphic novel format with the word bubbles, and so yeah, it's a lot of fun to write fractured fairy tales, and the cool thing is anybody can do it. And so I tell the students that all the time. If they ask me, "Are you going to write a sequel to Dear Dragon?" I'm like, maybe, but I'd love to see yours. What do you think happens next?
Nice.
And so that's a great way to get the kids involved.
Fantastic. We're going to talk to you about all your current projects, your future projects. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll see you when we come back. We're with Josh Funk. Thanks for staying with us.
Welcome back to Novel Ideas. We're here with guest Josh Funk, a fabulous children's writer, and he also still has a day job, and these two kind of interface. So would you like to fill us in on how?
Well, yeah, I work as a software engineer, and so I do most of my writing from home on the evenings and weekends, and I like to. Most of my writing I do actually from bed, on a laptop, or even on my phone. Writing picture books, a lot of times I'll get a great line in my head, and sometimes I'll be in the shower or half asleep, half dreaming. I actually woke up in the middle of the night with the word pyrosaurs in my head, and I wrote it down, fell back asleep, and the next morning didn't remember writing it down, but I a few days later had a draft of a picture book, and a few years later we had it. So a lot of my writing I do in short spurts. Obviously, I do a lot of revisions with picture books, and I know that's something that some people don't realize. It never comes out right the first time. For Lady Pancake and Sir French Toast, I spent about 1.5 years editing and revising that book before I ended up even sending it to publishers, and I did about 15 revisions on that book over the course of the 1.5 years, and even once a publisher said, "Yeah, we want to publish it," it still took another 2 years. So it took about 3.5 years to 4 years to make some of these books. Some of them are a little shorter, but even the fastest one was about 2 years before it was from start to finish, because it takes time. The boring stuff like working out contracts, and thankfully I have an agent that helps with that. Finding an illustrator takes time. So with some of the sequels, it takes less time. So because we already have the illustrator, we already have worked out contracts in the past. So so those ones are a little quicker. But then yeah, the illustrator has to spend 1 year working on it, 6 months, depending on the format that they do. Are they doing it digitally or by hand? Most of my books are some digital, some watercolor. It's a mix. They're all different illustrators, incredibly talented people. I'm so fortunate that I'm able to work with some amazing illustrators, and I don't actually work with them.
Right.
One thing that people sometimes find interesting is that I don't ever talk to the illustrators while they're illustrating the book and I'm writing. I work with the team at the publisher. I work with the editor. The editor talks to somebody called the art director, and there's a whole team of people up here working. And then the art director talks to the illustrator, but I never talk to the illustrator. And they kind of like it that way.
I was going to ask you, is that done by design just so there's no kind of butting heads of things, or?
That's one reason. The
Yeah.
the publisher also probably wants to keep control over over the process, and they know what's going to sell. Frankly, I don't know what's going to look good as a tiny little icon online or face out at Barnes and Noble or an independent bookstore. I don't know what's going to look good. So the fact that let them take care. They have the salespeople that go around the country. They have all the marketing people that go to the expos and conferences. So, I write the words. Somebody else can illustrate. I don't know how to illustrate a book, and really, if I did want to illustrate my own book, I should learn how. Because they are artists in their own right. I feel like more so. I write 500 words. They illustrate 20 full-page paintings or spreads. So it takes a lot more time for what they do, I think, than what I do in some ways. I have a lot of respect for them.
So in terms of your craft, I just want to kind of take you back a little bit. I know you've had some great success over these years. You're not all that far into this process. So there are so many people who say, I have a great idea for a children's book. How do I bring it from the great idea that's in my head, half asleep, whether it's Pyrosaurs or not, or a more developed idea that they've been working on? How do they go from that spot to actually getting something that looks like some of your books?
I think that the most important thing is, A, write it down. You have to sit, get your butt in chair, as Jane Yolen says, and write. If you don't ever write it, it's never you never have a chance for it to turn into a book. But also, don't become too tied to a single idea. You will learn a lot. Absorb things. I've taken so many classes, workshops, gone to conferences, met people who've given great advice. There are numerous resources online, and you can find them at Facebook groups, whether it's websites. There's a ton of, especially for children's writing, there's a ton of different monthly challenges that you can do different times of year for writing to keep you motivated and to connect you with other writers who can give you feedback. But I think one thing, the best piece of advice that I have that I try to give to people is keep writing new things. Because if you get stuck revising that same picture book manuscript over and over again, the first book I wrote will never ever turn into a book. And it's okay. It's okay. I learned a lot from writing it and revising it and revising it and revising it and revising it, and even submitting it to some agents way too early and realizing, I look back at it now and I understand, number one, it wasn't all that well written. Number two, it wasn't all that marketable, my first several stories. But I know more about both the craft and the business. And those are really the two things you have to learn, but you can't force it. You have to just dive in and do it. And I don't regret sending out queries to agents too early, because if I didn't, then I wouldn't have learned that I needed to work harder on my writing before I'd start getting responses. So keep writing new things, and don't get, revise, go through the process, but don't get too tied to a single idea, because your next idea that you have is going to be from a much better starting point than your first idea. You'll have learned so much more about the craft and the business when you start that second book than you will have when you start that first book.
That's truly invaluable. Thank you.
Yeah.
You bet.
Well, let's talk about your two newest books, and these sort of had a beginning in your workplace.
Yeah, so I have a book coming out called How to Code a Sandcastle, and I get a lot of, where did you get this idea? And frankly, my agent said, hey, you're an engineer, you should write a book about coding. And I thought, I don't know, I don't really do nonfiction. And she said, well, there's this other kind of thing that's not nonfiction, it's informational fiction. And there are books that are fiction, but they have a lot of information in them. So this isn't how to, well, it is. It's called How to Code a Sandcastle. This isn't actually how to code anything, but it's about a little girl named Pearl and her robot Pascal, and the two of them build a sandcastle on the last day of summer. But they don't do it using the traditional, okay, we're just going to build it. They use coding concepts to build this sandcastle, such as loops and conditionals, or if-then-elses is what I call them, because conditional is a pretty big word, and sequences, and basic things that, honestly, they're learning in kindergarten or preschool right now. Kids are learning how to code with these concepts, and even these names, loops, or maybe they call them repeats, but every single coding language has the basic similar structure of, you're going to have to say, if this happens, then do something, or an else, do that. And whether you call it an if-then-else or a conditional, it's all there. So in this book, Pearl, so this is an advanced copy. It's not final yet. I don't have a final copy. It's called a Folded and Gathered, an F&G. It is, which is why you can see it's not stapled. But so Pearl says, okay, we need to gather up sand, so let's use a sequence to do that. So fill the pail with sand, dump the sand on our spot, pat the sand down. Oh, we're going to need to repeat that, so let's put that in a loop. And so on the next page, as these fall apart, we put that inside a loop. And we loop through that same sequence. And so we get a lot of, it's ideally, like I said, I try to write with humor, a funny story about a girl building a sandcastle, but you also are exposed to coding terminology and concepts that really are accessible by anyone who, it's human logic is what it is. So I'm really excited about this book, and part of that reason is it's published in conjunction with Girls Who Code, which is an incredible organization that encourages girls to get into the fields of technology. I've been coding and working in the industry for 20 plus years or now, and I look around the office and I see that there are very few women in engineering positions. Whether it's, I don't know all the numbers exactly, it could be 10%, it could be 25%, it could be 3%, depending on where you are. But you look around and we definitely need more women in the engineering fields, and Girls Who Code is an organization that encourages girls to start coding at a younger age. Now, they have a ton of programs across the country. At this point, last I heard, it was 40,000 girls have been through this program. It may be more by now. And so they're for ages 6th grade and up, but they are working to have programs for even younger kids. And this picture book, published with Penguin, has a whole bunch of books published with Girls Who Code. This is the first picture book that is involved with it. But yeah, I sent this book to my editor, who edited Dear Dragon, and she said, we have this connection with Girls Who Code. Would you be interested in putting it in that partnership? And I thought,
perfect.
Of course. I can't think of it. It was always a girl and her robot that were the main characters because of, like I said, I look around my office and we need more women engineers. And so, yeah, I couldn't be more thrilled with how this turned out. It's illustrated by Sarah Palacios, and the founder, Reshma Saujani, of Girls Who Code, even wrote a foreword, which is pretty exciting. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah.
So you had a background in coding at some point,
Yes,
I've heard?
actually, I was a science major back way in the dark ages. And I was the only girl in a physics lecture hall of 300. There were 3 of us in my Fortran class.
What, Fortran?
Wait,
What is that?
Fortran.
I'm
It
not
was a
familiar.
Fortran class.
I'm just kidding. I've heard of Fortran. So, this is in the 90s, right?
Oh, not hardly.
Some 90s. That's good.
It wasn't that different in the
Yeah.
90s. When I was in
But,
college,
yeah.
there, if there were more than 2 or 3 girls in a class of 100,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
it was not in my computer
Yeah.
science classes. So, yeah, it's. You'd like to think that it's changed, but go to Girls Who Code's website. They have all the up-to-date numbers,
Cool.
and it's not getting as it's not improving as much as you'd like to
Yeah.
think.
Oh, I
So.
wish.
We are just about out
Yeah.
of time. There's a couple other books I want you to at least hold up so people can get a little sneak preview of what they're looking forward to this spring and summer.
So May 1st, my very next book is called Albie Newton, and it's about a little boy who is a whiz. He doesn't have the best social skills, though, and he goes to class for the first time, goes to school for the first time, and ends up ruining everybody's day in his attempt to make friends. And one other thing that I like about this book is that it really represents my office. There are 10 kids in the class, including Albie Newton, and I look around. There's a big effort to have diverse characters in books, and to represent what the real world is. And this book is, there are 10 kids in Albie's class. There's Arjun, there is Kai, there is Dave, there's Jane, there's Evie, there's Sona. There's a wide array of backgrounds, and I'm really excited to not only have this represent a more realistic classroom, but also that there are kids with social skills, well, lacking social skills, who often are misunderstood, and I've worked with some of them as adults, and I'm sure that there are a lot of teachers who have interacted with them as students, and I want them to be able to see themselves as in books, have mirrors and windows, and I think this is what I really hope is a mirror and window book. And then Lost in the Library, this book is published in conjunction with the New York Public Libraries, and it is about patience and fortitude, the two lions that live outside, the lion statues, I should say, that live outside the New York Public Library on Fifth Avenue, and patience goes missing. And Fortitude has to venture into the library and leave his post for the first time ever to find him. And you get a tour of the library throughout. And the illustrations for all of my books are incredible. The use of light that Stevie Lewis has done, her art is incredible in some of these. I've probably said incredible a lot of times. That's apparently my word for tonight. But her use of light is fabulous. And the palettes that she's put together, and I'm very excited about this one. And hopefully, I get to take a trip to New York and actually do a story time at the New York Public Library. That would be super cool.
Wow.
Thank
Well,
you.
Josh, this has just been an incredible evening. We appreciate you joining us so much.
There's that word
It's been
again.
great.
And it's
Incredible.
justified.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Thanks to our viewers and everyone here at Access Framingham.
And we'll see you next time on Novel Ideas.